Okay, so in this video we're going to have a look at the Betaflight settings for the TinyHawk to Freestyle upgrade. So this is the upgrade where we actually take the flight controller board out of the original drone and we replace it with an all-in-one flight controller with a 20x20 mounting pattern, and of course a new VTX, a new receiver. So basically, if you want to have a look at how we get it to this stage, how to install all the hardware, see the previous video. In this video we're going to start on the Betaflight settings. Right, first thing we're going to do is get our multimeter, and we're just going to set it onto the continuity setting, and we're just going to check continuity to make sure we've got no short connections here. So just on the battery connector there, we're just going to touch to both of the terminals. Okay, there's no sound there. We'll swap over and see we've got a short beep there. So that's actually because we've got this capacitor here and it's storing a little bit of charge, and that's why it's giving a little beep. So we'll just check it again, nothing there, swap over, and the beep goes away pretty much straight away, so that's okay. Alright, so of course if you've got a smoke stopper, always use a smoke stopper the first time you connect the battery. The next stage is to actually check that all of the components are actually getting power. So to do this, we're going to plug in a USB cable, and basically what we're looking for is that we get three lights. Basically one light is going to be up the front here, the receiver. The next light, the blue flashing light you can see there in the middle, is the video transmitter. And the light on this side, seems like a red light, is the flight controller board. So we know that all the components are getting power. I'm just going to turn my transmitter on and do one final check. And assuming that you've actually bound your transmitter and your receiver previously, you'll see that the receiver will turn green. You can see the light up the front there, so we know that they're bound correctly. Right, one more check we're going to do is the VTX, make sure it's all working. So we'll connect a battery, a 2S battery. Make sure if this is the first time you're connecting it, make sure you use the smoke stopper. Okay, so I'm just going to plug this one in here. So at this stage the VTX should be transmitting. I'm just going to turn on my screen here. Okay, I'm just going to have to do a scan. Alright, so we're just going to scan there and just make sure that the video transmitter is outputting something, and that's going to indicate that our camera is all connected up properly, and we can see, yep, we can see it's transmitting correctly there. There's no OSD at the moment because we haven't set that up. Okay, so we've verified that everything is getting power at least. Now before we go and change any settings in Betaflight, we just want to take a copy of the original settings that are on the flight controller at the moment. So we'll just plug the USB in. Okay, we're just going to go into Betaflight, and we're going to use a command to actually pull all the settings off the flight controller board, and we're going to save a copy of them. Alright, so we're just going to connect here. And the first thing we're going to do is just head straight down to the CLI, and we're going to wait for it to do its little part here, and then we're going to type in dump all. And you need to give this a minute or two. It's just going to come up with all of the settings on the screen here. Okay, you can see at the end here it's got save, so it's finished. Okay, so basically this is a copy of all of the settings on the flight controller board, and we just want to make a backup copy of that. So I'm just going to save to file, and we'll just save that somewhere on our computer, on the desktop, and that's what we're saving it as there. The next part is to check that the receiver is working correctly, so we'll look at the Betaflight settings to do that. First of all, we'll disconnect. Okay, so for the receiver, first thing we want to do is come to the ports tab. Now, you remember from the previous video, we had our receiver. I'm using a tracer receiver, and that was connected to UART 6. So we're just going to enable serial receiver here on UART 6, Okay, so I'm just going to enable that and do a save and reboot. And we'll just let that reboot and connect again. The next thing we need to do is go into the configuration tab. And on this tab, we're just going to scroll down to the receiver section. Now, you're going to do this based on your receiver. In my case, I'm using a serial-based receiver. In fact, probably you'll be using a serial-based receiver as well. And because I'm using Tracer, it's going to use the Crossfire protocol. You might be using one of these other ones here. In my case, it's Crossfire. So we'll just save and reboot. Once we've done that, we're just going to turn our transmitter on, and we're just going to see that the receiver is actually picking up the transmitter. So back into Betaflight. So in Betaflight, in the receivers tab, we're just going to move the sticks on the transmitter, and we're just going to check that we've actually got movement on all the sticks there. Okay, we can see they're all moving correctly. And so we're almost set up. One thing we need to look at is if I increase the stick here, you can see it goes to 2011. And if I bring it back, it goes not down to 1000 but 1005. So what we want to do is you want these to be coming from 1000 to 2000. And if I check this one here, the throttle, okay. So we can see a lot of these, all the sticks I think need to be adjusted. So there's two ways you can do it. You can do this adjustment in Betaflight, or you can do it on the transmitter. The better way to do it is actually on the transmitter, I think. So I'm going to show you how to actually adjust these on the transmitter. The first thing we need to do is to go into our transmitter settings, and we need to set extended limits. So on the new model, we're going to come to the right and go to the model menu, the setup menu, and we're just going to go down here, and it will either be called extended limits or E-limits, and we're just going to check that. Okay, and we're going to enable that. So once the extended limits is enabled, we can come across. Okay, we're going to go into the output screen. Now you can see here our channel map is TAER1234. So channel 1, of course, is throttle, and on the transmitter here, it's the same thing. Channel 1 is throttle. So we're just going to edit that. Now what we're going to do, throttle, we're just going to hold the throttle down the bottom. You can see we're moving it there. Full and minimum. Okay, so we're going to hold the throttle down to the bottom. And on the transmitter, we're going to come down to minimum. And this is the value we want to change. So when we change this value on the transmitter, you're going to see here in OpenTX, you're going to see this value change here. Okay, so I'll just bring it down, and you can see how it's changing there. There we go. Okay, so you can see that we're adjusting it. So we'll go back the other way. So the aim is to get that to 1000, or as close to 1000 as possible. So I'm 100.0, 99.9, 99.6. Okay, and we're slowly getting there, 98.3. Okay, so at negative 97.9, we're hitting 1000. So we're going to save that. Next thing we're going to do is move the throttle all the way to the top. And we're going to go down to maximum here. We're going to select that so we can change it. So that's at 2011. So we're going to bring that one down. And we want to get that as close to 2000 as possible. So we'll just go down another one, 98.4, 98.3. One more, it should drop down. Okay, I'll go back up again to 98.0, it's 2001, so I'm going to bring it down to 97.9. Okay, we'll set that there. So if we look at the throttle now, it goes from a minimum of 1000 and up to a maximum of as close to 2000 as we can get it. Okay, so that's the procedure, and you just need to do that with all of the channels. The final part here is to go and set our low stick threshold and high stick threshold. So for the low stick threshold, we just want to set it to 1010, and the high stick threshold, we just want to set that to 1990. Okay, don't forget to save and reboot. Now the final thing we need to do is set our endpoints. Okay, to do this on the transmitter, we'll look at the transmitter first. So down here, on each transmitter is going to be different, but down here you're going to have a readout, and you can change that to different values, so showing stick position and so on. We need to somehow get the readout for each of the sticks, and you see as I move the throttle stick here, you can see this value here is changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the throttle stick until I get that as close to 0 as possible. And it's not going to be exact, but there we go, that's pretty close. So then that's basically just getting our throttle stick in the center. And now this is not 100% accurate, but it's the best we can do for the throttle. Okay, we'll just go over here to outputs, and let's have a look back at the Betaflight here. So we can see for throttle, we've actually got it pretty much right, it's 1500. Same with yaw, same with roll. This one here, pitch. Okay, so pitch is E, pitch, elevator. Okay, and the third one across, which is channel 3 here. Okay, so if we look back at the transmitter, we're going down to channel 3, and we're going to edit that. We're going to come down to sub trim and change the sub trim. So this sub trim adjusts the center position. So let's have a look at what happens here. As I bring this down, have a look at the pitch. You can see it coming down there. We've gone too far. So now I'm going to come back up, negative 1.5, negative 1.4. And as I bring this up, if we look at the pitch here, we'll see this value coming up to 1500. Okay, right there. And on the transmitter here, we see negative 1.0 is where we need to be. So we're just going to set that. Okay, and go back. Okay, so now we've got all of our endpoints set as well as our center points. Alright, so of course we need to set up our modes for Betaflight. So we'll look at how to do that very quickly. Now setting up modes is a rather involved process. So we'll just come down to the modes tab here in Betaflight. The first one at the top here is the ARM mode, so I'll just hit add range. Now with the auxiliary switch, if you happen to know what your auxiliary switches are, I happen to know that this one here is number 1. Okay, so I'm just going to set this to 1, and you can see when I flip this switch on the Betaflight there, you can actually see the position moving. So for me, up is arming, and I'm just going to move the sliders to enable it to arm when the switch is in that position. Okay, so basically my modes, the way I set up my modes is going to be different to the way you set up your modes. Okay, well I'm not going to walk you through and do all the mode setting. I'm going to assume that you've actually set up modes before, because of course you've set up your TinyHawk originally. So at this point you go through and set up all of your modes. Well, we know the VTX is working properly because we checked it before, but now we're just going to do the actual settings. So we're just going to plug in and connect to Betaflight. So here we are in Betaflight. We're just going to go over to the ports tab. Now you remember in the previous video when we were doing the soldering up, we had the UART3 is what we were using for the tramp. So we're just going to come over here to peripherals, and you've got two options. You've got TBS Smart Audio or IRC Tramp. So in our case, of course, it's going to be Tramp, and we're just going to select Tramp there, save and reboot. We'll just let it reboot and connect again. So we'll just come over into the video transmitter tab now. Okay, we're looking up on the top. Okay, top right over here it says VTX type and it says Tramp, and device ready it says no. Okay, so the reason it says no, of course, is because we don't have the battery plugged in. So we're just going to plug the battery in and go straight back in there. So we're just going to disconnect and reconnect again and go straight over to the video transmitter tab. Okay, so now we can see VTX type is Tramp and device ready is yes. Next thing to do is set up the VTX table. So once we're back in the Betaflight on the video transmitter tab. So up the top of the Betaflight page, if we have a look in the yellow box here, we've got a link. Okay, so we'll just click on that link and we'll go to the Betaflight GitHub page. Okay, now this particular VTX we're using is a tramp, but if you're using another one, you've got the various options here. So you can choose EU or USA. So basically we'll just come down here, and what we want to do is Control A to select all, and we're just going to copy that to the clipboard. So back over here in Betaflight, we'll come down to load from clipboard on the bottom right here. Okay, and that just loads all the settings. And if we come down here, we can see it's actually set out our VTX table, and it's also set up our default 6 power levels. Okay, this particular VTX actually does have 5 power levels. If not, then you'll need to change that. Okay, other things we can do here is we can actually set our band. Okay, if we want to set a particular band, we can do it there. And a power level, I'm just going to set mine on 200 for the moment. Another thing I'd like to do is actually just change this to on until first arm. When basically if you have a crash and you flip over, it's not going to go back to low power setting when you arm again. Okay, so they're the things that I like to use, and we're just going to save that, and that's the VTX setup. Right, the next thing we're going to do is actually set up the ESCs. So we're just going to connect, and we're going to use BL Heli Configurator. So it's one that looks like this, not Betaflight. Make sure you disconnect from Betaflight first, and I'll show you where to get this from if you haven't got it already. Okay, so BL Heli Configurator, just do a search for it in Google. So it's BL Heli Configurator. This is the one you want here. You can download that and get that set up. This is what the address is going to look at. Currently it's version 1.2.0 as of when I'm making this video. So we're just going to set that up, and when it opens up, it looks like this. Okay, now one thing you're going to have to do is actually plug in the battery first. So we'll need this to actually power up the ESCs, and then we'll go back to the configurator. So here in the configurator, once we've got it connected with the USB and the battery plugged in, we'll disconnect. It gives us a warning here. Okay, now with the battery plugged in, when you hit the read setup, okay, you just give it a second, and it'll come up here with all of our parameters. Okay, and you can see on the left here, okay, we've got all of our settings there, and on the right here for each of the ESCs, you can see the settings there. Okay, motor direction is something we can change in here. We'll look at that in a second. Okay. So basically what we want to do, it's actually identified the version of the software here. So we're just going to flash all of the ESCs. Okay, so it's the current version. Okay, here we go, yep, the current version. We're not going to do a beta version, just go with the highest possible official version, and then flash. Okay, so it's just going to go through and flash each ESC separately. Okay, and once that's done, you'll see the buttons come up here again. Okay, then we can come back and disconnect. The next part is to check our motor direction, and all the motors are in the right order. So for that, of course, we're going to have to connect to Betaflight, and we'll need to connect the battery as well. Okay, let's have a look at what we do in Betaflight here. Okay, so in Betaflight we're just connecting here, and we're just going to go straight to the motors tab. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is check that the motor order is correct. For example here, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, scroll down to the bottom and make sure of course you've got your propellers off when you're doing this. So no propellers on the motors. Down the bottom right here we've got I understand the risks, so we'll just check that. That will enable us to actually spin the motors. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this here. So the first thing we're going to do, down here, motor 1, we're just going to inch this slider up just a fraction, and we expect to see this motor here spin, motor 1, which is this one down here. Okay, so let's just move this up a little bit. Okay, I can see that motor spinning there, which is motor 1, so we're all good. Next one is motor 2, which should be the one at the front here, this one here. We'll check that. Okay, and that's spinning okay. Next one, motor 3, which should be at the back down here. And that's correct. Okay, I think we're all good here, so, and obviously that's going to be correct, we'll just check it anyway. Okay, motor 4 up the front there. Okay, well, you can be lucky sometimes. All our motors are actually in the right order. Now, if they're not, I won't be able to show you on this video, but if they're not, just do a search on YouTube for motor resource mapping, and there's a method that you can use to actually, you do it in the CLI, and you actually remap the motors to the correct position. So do a search on that if your motors aren't in the right position. Alright, from there, we move on to motor direction. So to test motor direction, first of all, we don't do it with the props on. What we use is tape. Now I like to use something like masking tape, something that's a little bit thick and that you can feel when it hits your finger. And basically what we're going to do is just put it around the motors, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so we want to get it around the motors. Don't put it down here, just put it up here, just level with the bottom of the can there. And basically that just goes all the way around the motor, like so. And leave enough so it's joined up there. Okay, and that's how it looks. And this is what's going to spin around, and you'll be able to put your finger there and feel it hitting your finger. Okay, so you don't want it to hit the frame as it comes past here, so you might just want to trim it up a bit. Just trim any bits off that you don't need. Okay, so that's it there. So we're going to do that on each motor, and then we're going to test the direction of the motors. To test motor direction, we'll first off connect to Betaflight. Okay, once connected there, because we're spinning the motors up, we'll need a battery connected as well. And now we'll have a look in Betaflight. Okay, so with our battery connected in Betaflight here, we just come down to the motors tab. Make sure you've got the checkbox checked here so you can spin the motors up. So we're just going to spin the first motor, motor 1. So if we look at Betaflight, it's this one down here, which is this one here. I'm just going to put my finger there to feel which way the tape is spinning. Okay, so I can feel that that motor is actually turning this way. And if we look at the diagram, that's actually back to front. It should be turning this way. Okay, so I'll make a note. Motor 1 needs to be changed. Next one is motor 2 up the front there. Alright, motor 2 I can feel is going this way, which we can see is back to front according to the diagram here. So motor 2 needs to be changed. Next one, motor 3. Okay, I can feel motor 3 going this way, which is correct according to the diagram here, so that's fine. Next one up the front there, motor 4. Okay, and motor 4 is turning this direction, which of course is opposite to what the diagram shows here. So there's our list there. Motors 1, 2 and 4, all of these need to actually be changed. So what we're going to do first is disconnect from Betaflight. Alright, so we've disconnected from Betaflight and we've now connected the USB, and we've also connected the battery, so we're now in BL Heli. Okay, this is BL Heli Configurator. Okay, just make sure you're using Configurator, not BL Heli S or BL Heli 32. So we'll click the connect button. We'll read the setup down the bottom right here. And here's our 4 ESCs here. So if we refer back to our list, it was number 1, 2 and 4 we needed to change. So here's ESC number 1. We're going to reverse the direction and flash firmware. Now it already tells us the version that's there. We're just going to choose 16.7 in my case, that's the latest version, and flash. And you can see the progress bar going here. So that's ESC1. Next we're doing ESC2, reverse direction. Then finally, down the bottom, ESC number 4. Okay, that's done. Right setup. Okay, and with that done, we can disconnect. Now that we've changed the motor direction, the last thing you might want to do is go back into BL Heli and actually just recheck your motors again and make sure they are actually spinning the right direction. I'll just skip that step in the video here. Next thing we're going to check is our gyro alignment. So we want to go into Betaflight and connect again. We're just going to come into the setups tab here. Okay, we're looking for this image here. So what we're looking for is if we reset our axis, basically we're just looking that the image on the screen replicates what we're seeing here. Okay, if it's not, we're going to have to adjust some settings. In our case, it's all fine. Okay, so if you need to change your board alignment, just come into the configuration tab here. And down here on the right hand side, we've got board and sensor alignment, and this is where you can change your settings to align the sensor. Another thing you might want to look at is in the configuration tab. On the right hand side here, if we come down to arming, now it's defaulted to 25, the maximum arm angle. So what this means is if the quad is more than 25 degrees angle, it won't arm. Now that's a good safety feature if you only want to arm when it's set flat. But just remember, if you crash and you use flip over mode and you might not be completely level and you still want it to arm, of course. So it's up to you if you want to set that. If you set it at 180 degrees, it'll just totally disable it. So that's up to you. Next, we're going to set our gyro and PID frequency settings. So we're back in Betaflight. So here in Betaflight, we're going to connect. Just come down to the configuration tab on the left and scroll down a little bit on the left hand side. You've got two settings, gyro update frequency as well as PID loop frequency. So we're going to just make sure you've got both of these set to 8 kilohertz. If this is different, then change it. Save and reboot. So we'll just connect again there. Come back into configuration. Okay, just check they're all set. And then come down to the bottom of the screen here and you'll see it says CPU load. So as long as this CPU load is below 50%, mine is actually only at 6%, as long as that is below 50%, you're all good. If it's over 50%, then I'd suggest that you change this back to what it was, whether it was 4 kilohertz or whatever. Okay, so as long as that's under 50%, we're all good to go there. Now on this build, I don't actually have a beeper installed, so I'm going to use something called D-Shot beeper configuration. And to do that, we simply, in the configuration tab, we scroll down to the bottom. Okay, right down here it says D-Shot beacon configuration, right here. And we've got some settings. Now, I've actually got a switch set up on my transmitter, so I'm going to set this to RX set. Next thing we want to do is check our battery voltage. So we're actually just going to use a test battery, any battery will do. So this one is measuring 7.44. Okay, so that's what we need to remember, 7.44. Next thing we're going to do is connect to Betaflight again. Okay, so here in Betaflight we're going to connect with the USB, and I'm also connecting the battery. Okay, so with the battery connected on the left hand side, we're coming down here to power and battery. So that was 7.44. The value we're looking at is this one here, 7.28. So it's a little bit off. What we can do is we can adjust the scale. So down here where it says 108, I'm just going to bump that up to say 110 and hit the save. And you can see up here on the top right, we've got 7.4 showing. I might just take it up to 111. So now it's up to 7.46, so I think I'll go down. Okay, 110, save again, and we've got 7.39. Okay, so I think that's accurate as we can get it. Next, we're going to come down to the PID tuning, and we're just going to go over to rates profile. So what we're actually going to do is set our rates. Okay, so it's going to come up with the Betaflight standard default rates and default linear throttle curve. And you can just put in your own rates here if you've got your own rates. Now I'm just going to quickly put in my rates. Okay, so there we go. That's my rates put in. Now, don't go off my rates. You know, you just go off your rates. I tend to have the more active throttle. You can see the throttle, the blue line here, sorry, not the throttle, the yaw. The blue line here is a little bit more steep than the other one, so I don't like to move my yaw to the left and right as much because I don't like it right over across the side when I'm adjusting throttle. So I like to keep it more centered, and that's what this steeper curve does there. I've also got the, over on the right hand here, the throttle curve. So I've got a little bit of a flattened area here, just to get a hover band, a nice little bit of flattening in the hover band there. Okay, but anyway, that's the rates that I'm using on my TinyHawks at the moment, so you just set according to yourself. Next, you can come down to the OSD and just set up your OSD as you like to have it. I'll just set up mine as I like to have it. While you're doing your OSD settings, you really should connect the battery and just have a look at what it looks like on your display. Sometimes what you see on the screen here, the position you see on the screen here is not going to be exactly the same as on your display. So just refer to both of those as you're doing your settings. And we're almost there. One last test we want to do with the propellers off is actually connect the battery. Okay, allow it to connect. Okay, just arm it and just raise the throttle a little bit and just make sure that your motors are spinning up. Okay, not too much. Now remember, with the props off, the motors might spin up. Okay, the motors might spin up by themselves, so just make sure they're spinning up a little bit with the props off. Okay, so there we go. Finally, props on, double check your motor direction, props in or props out. Check all your screws are tight, check all your cables are tied down, and we're ready to give it a quick test. So when we do a quick test, we're going to put it well away from ourselves. We're just going to arm it, pop it off the ground, and disable. So with that test done, we're ready to go and fly. I'm using a 550 milliamp hour battery, that's a 2S battery. If you'd like to see how it flies, just have a look at the next video in the series.